Welcome to the Matt Phillips Podcast. I am Matt Phillips, your sales leadership coach, mental toughness expert, and founder of Matt Phillips Coaching. We help sales managers and leaders make more money, save time, and become kick-ass leaders of their sales teams. And that's what we're here to talk about on this podcast. We are here to give you the tools and tactics to build a well-oiled sales machine and teach you the mental toughness skills so you can show up confident, focused, emotionally in control, and ready to energize your team. It's time to talk sales leadership and mental toughness. Let's get into today's episode. Welcome to today's podcast. We are back to talk about priorities. I cannot tell you how many conversations I have around this exact topic in my one-on-one coaching and the group coaching calls that we have. And actually last Friday in our high performance leadership program, we have group coaching calls every week. And this was the exact topic we spent the entire hour on, going through and talking to individuals on the Zoom about how they set priorities, what challenges that they have, how are they maintaining expectations for their team, and how sometimes priorities get out of whack. And that's what I want to deep dive into today. I think it's such an important topic, such a critical area to focus on because, within this, as we set priorities, not only are we trying to drive business growth, right? Drive growth of our sales team, of our finance team, whatever team that you lead. Of course, we want to drive those results. But we have to understand that there's a focus that we're trying to maintain with the team, right? We don't want to have this scatteredness with our team. We want to maintain this focus marching towards the same goal. And when we do that, our team shows up more motivated, more inspired to do that work. And that's why this area is so critical. Now, I've got lots of different stories that I could share with you today, but I want to start with one before I get into kind of the different issues that I face, right? Because I hope you get off this episode and you start looking at your priorities differently. And maybe you challenge the way that you're doing things, because this is, again, about your personal growth, your professional growth. This is about the growth of your company, your team, your sales, your results. And that's why we have to maintain this hyper focus along the way. Now, I'll tell you one stat, which I find really, really interesting. And I share, and I'm probably off a little bit on the minutes and seconds here, but I was reading this one study that said that we are interrupted on average every 12 minutes and 40 seconds. Right? Every 12 minutes and 40 seconds. Which you're probably sitting there being like, yeah, I'm distracted quite a bit, right? So whether an email comes in or somebody walks in your office or the phone call or whatever it might be, you're interrupted quite a bit. Well, if you look further at the study, it says that it takes something like another 25 minutes to get refocused, like fully refocused on the thing that you were working on prior to that interruption. And I find this like mind-blowing, right? That I'm interrupted and it takes me 25 minutes to get back on track. And obviously today I'm focusing on the priorities that you set for your team and for yourself. But it's just something to keep in mind of like your people that you lead are dealing with this exact same thing. And that's why sometimes when these distractions come, right, in form of the shiny object or a shift in priorities or many other things, that we're taking the focus away potentially from really important things that our team's trying to achieve. And I remember this one client I was working with, I won't tell you the detailed specifics of it, but I had to have a conversation with the CEO because it's pretty cool with what I do, right? With companies that I work with, and not all companies are the same, but there are some organizations where I get to do a lot of different things at a lot of different levels. So for example, with a couple of my clients, I do work with the executive leadership team, right? So it's doing one-on-one coaching, it's doing workshops that we meet on a quarterly basis. So we get to really, really have just quality time together. And then also we have our high performance leadership program in place with the mid-level manager. So we're covering not only the top level, but also the mid-level. And then there's this cascading impact below, right? But this high performance leadership program has group coaching and ongoing training, things like that. So we're creating this common language, doing all these things. Well, because that I'm integrated with these different levels of the organizations, I hear a lot. Right. And what I do as a coach is I try to listen for themes. And if I really see these themes pop up and they're really critical, and I know I need to say something to them, of course, I keep the confidentiality of the conversations, but I will bubble up these themes in a strategic way with the permission of the people, right? Because again, if one person's saying it at the top and one person's saying it at the mid-level, and I know that it's being set at the lowest levels within an organization, right? Every level is connected. That's something that needs to be addressed. And I will bring that up. And there was this one situation where I called the CEO and I said, hey, are you open to hearing a theme that I'm seeing bubbling up across all levels of the organization and every function within the organization? They said, of course, yes. And I had heard that this one person on the leadership team put together this amazing presentation on like looking 3 years ahead. And I mean, it was just an incredible analysis and PowerPoint presentation, all these sorts of things. And in this case, it actually came from the CEO, but there was a mandate kind of put because this person did this. So it was just, I don't know, just excited to share it with her colleagues, that it became this mandate of, well, now everyone has to do this. So there's this pressure that was felt from the leadership team and then everyone down below because it was a shift in priorities. And I shared that with the CEO and just said, hey, I just want you to be aware that now there's this additional pressure when there's so much going on right now that I just want you to be aware of, and just ask the question, like, is this the right time for that analysis for the team? And we ended up having a good discussion about it. I discussed it with others on the leadership team as well. And they made a shift in their approach with this. But it's such a really simple example of what I call the shiny object syndrome, which I'm raising two hands right here. If you're probably listening to this, you can't see my hands raised, but I have this happen to me all the time. That shiny object, that new idea, that squirrel, however you want to describe it. I mean, I see it and I'm like, ooh, that's it. That's going to be the game changer. And then I'm completely 100% distracted. And that's why you've heard me say on these podcasts before, I'm so blessed to have my wife in my business, because she keeps me focused, right? And she'll even often go and say, hey, wait a minute. Is this in alignment with the priorities that we set? And maybe it is. Sometimes we're like, this is the right move, but oftentimes it's not. It's a distraction. And so we have to be so careful as leaders within our organizations to be taking information that's coming down from the top, that's coming up, and make sure that we're making the right assessment at the right time to make sure it's just not just another distraction. So again, I've got story after story after story about this, but again, we are all, I think, just constantly balancing our priorities and trying to figure out where should we spend time and why should we spend time there. And, one of my coaches taught me that concept of, we've all heard of ROI, right? Return on investment, but he taught me this ROT, it's return on time, like where we're spending our time is absolutely critical. And that's why it's so important that we just constantly look at these things. So first of all, there's a couple things that, I was reading a couple articles on, and the first is return on time, right? We're trying to maximize the time that we have. And that may be cliche and all these sorts of things, like, we were put on this earth for a reason, and we have to use our time well, and, time is short and life is short and all these things. We hear them and we understand them, but the reality is it's true. And so the way we use our time in our business and in leadership and in our personal life is so, so critical. My wife and I were talking just this weekend, and I'm making some adjustments to what I'm doing and where I'm spending time and how I'm getting clear in my business, of course, but also personal life, right? Of just making sure that, again, we're all so busy. We've got all these things going on. I mean, my business is number one, fortunately or unfortunately, but sometimes I even find myself being pulled in so many directions that I don't have the energy to show up my best. So even today, I'm spending time refocusing myself and my business on some other priorities personally and in our business. So time is a huge thing, right? And we have to be very, very careful from a leadership perspective of ensuring that we're not wasting the time of our people, right? Because they start getting confused. They start getting overwhelmed. They will adopt the second point, which I wanted to talk to you about. This article talked about quiet quitting, right? And I don't think quiet quitting is anything new. I think we just put a new label on it, or whoever wrote this article decided to put a label on it, because we have to label things these days, right? So quiet quitting is the next thing. Well, this has existed forever, in my opinion, right? We just didn't have a term for it. It's just, it feels like our team's taking their foot off the gas, or boy, they don't seem as engaged anymore. Right? Those are the terms that I kind of grew up in the world with, understanding, and now we call it quiet quitting, right? They just take their foot off the gas. They're like, whatever. And I think this priority thing is a huge part of it, where they don't understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, when they're supposed to do it. And even when they're working on it, then 2 minutes later it shifts. And maybe you've experienced that as well. I have. Oh boy, I have. Right? One thing's important, now it's not. Now I don't really know what I'm supposed to work on. And I'm not saying by any means it is easy. And I'm going to give you a tip here in a minute, but it's not easy. But if we take the right steps, we can make it a heck of a lot simpler for ourselves and for our team, and to open this dialogue and this communication to really talk about these things and make sure that we as a team are staying in alignment. As leaders, that we are creating this environment where it's okay for our team to actually approach us and talk to us about these things, and make sure, then challenge us to make sure that we're not, as leaders, getting distracted, even though we don't like it, even though we don't like being challenged. It's probably the best thing for us, isn't it?
For all you sales managers and leaders out there, I wonder if you've ever thought the phrase, why in the world did I sign up for this? I know I have. And the reality is that leading a team of salespeople can be challenging, right? Just figuring out how to motivate each person and keep the pipeline full, and just dealing with the pressure of delivering the month after month results that your company's requiring. And call me an optimist, but amidst the challenge, amidst sometimes the frustration, we have this opportunity in front of us to really impart our knowledge, right? And to leave that legacy on our team, and just achieve next level results. And that's why today I want to personally invite you to our free masterclass training, where I'm going to share the exact secrets, the exact framework that I teach sales leaders around North America to help just take you to next level results for you and your team. And it's actually the exact framework that I taught one of my clients, who over a 12-month period tripled organic revenue growth and increased margin by 30%. So I want to invite you to that masterclass. You can click the link below or head over to mattphillipscoaching.com/webinar. And can't wait to see you in the training.
Right? When my wife or anybody on our team kind of says, yeah, Matt, come on now. Is this really right? The vast majority of the time, they're right. They're right. And I, as a leader, need to be open and listening to it. So there's 3 kind of areas where I see individuals get in trouble, leaders get in trouble, that I just want to share with you. And maybe one of these resonates with you, maybe multiples of these resonate with you. But the biggest issues with priorities that I see, number one, and this is in no particular order, by the way, but that priorities just keep shifting. I will call it the flavor of the month, or sometimes flavor of the week syndrome, where, again, there's just not clarity in the direction of where the company's going, or where the division going, or function's going. And so with that there's just this constant shifting in what's coming in and what's going out. And I know you've experienced this maybe from a boss or something like that, but we just feel like we have to continue to, let's try this and try that and try this and try that. And even in that time, it can become like utterly confusing for our team, right? Instead of, at some point, there's a courage, there is a confidence that has to come in to draw a line in the sand and say, okay, for a certain period of time, we're going to focus on these things, because I know if I focus on these things and these things only, and don't get distracted, that we're going to, at least, if nothing else, find out if we're on or off, right? If we start moving a direction, all of a sudden we took a hard right, and like, that's not what we wanted out of this, like, focus and this priority. But at least we've tested it for a certain period of time to know and get data to actually shift it. And so from a leadership perspective, we have to be sure that we're not shifting priorities too much. Of course, priorities will shift, and maybe what we're doing on a daily basis might shift a little bit. But again, these priorities tie into the overall vision. And one of the exercises that we do in our programs is to make sure and help you assess and make sure your priorities are tying to the vision. And we've got a vision that's set of where you want to go. And it's this dance that happens between those. When I see people get in trouble a lot where really the vision's not set, and that's why priorities are easily shiftable in that moment. The second area where I see people get and leaders get in trouble is that everything is a priority. Right? Everything is a priority. And so all of a sudden, maybe you've thought before, I know I have, where you look at your list and you're like, oh my gosh, like this priority list is massive. Like it's seemingly endless. It's huge. And it seems like that everything that we do is a priority. So when we try to prioritize things and say like, A, B, C, D, or this is priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, whatever kind of methodology you follow, that you're like, oh my gosh, this is another one, another one, another one, another A, another A. All of these are like top priority. And the reality is like that cannot be true. It is not true. And then when we do new things and we say, ooh, that's now important, whether it's reality or the perception, it's now that everything we do becomes a priority. And with that, I'm telling you right now, and I've experienced this, I'm experiencing this of we do not, as a team or as individuals, have the energy necessary to achieve everything on that list. We do not. Right now, over time, yes. Everything at once, no. So the key questions I always ask is like, what are the priorities now, right? For the next month, 2 months, 6 months. Like that's where it'll lead me into this third part here in a minute. But we actually have to take an assessment of these things and clearly communicate that with the team. And again, I some of the things I'm telling you, I'm sure you're like, yeah, I know, Matt. I know, which leads me to my third point. Where I see leaders get in trouble is we do not carve out time to really think about priorities, to really set them, to make sure we're not being distracted, to make sure that we are communicating these effectively. Like we don't take the time because we're all busy. Well, we're all cranking on all cylinders, right? We're flying like, nothing's going to get in our way. And I'm saying nothing's going to get in your way, but you better pause to make sure you're not about to run into a wall. And so with a lot of leadership teams, it's carving out time and pulling in the right people and doing all these things just to make sure that you're using your time wisely. The money is made, I believe, in the pauses, in taking time to decipher and figure out these little things. Are we moving in the right direction? Are we making everything a priority? Are we constantly shifting our priorities? Are we not communicating the why behind these priorities? Is this even tied to our vision or not? I don't know. But it's in the time that we take to pause and think. And on another note, from a leadership perspective, I may should do a whole podcast episode on this. I don't know. I don't know if I could fill the time. I probably could with stories, but I think leaders, I think we make that step up from, individual contributor to leader, or you go from one size of the team, so maybe 5 people to, bigger teams along the way. Our roles shift, right? And sometimes I think it's hard to really tie what we do to like value, right? Because it becomes squishier as you move up in companies, right? Where you're not doing the work. Like I'm not putting numbers in the spreadsheet, but I'm reviewing the spreadsheet. And that's a little squishier, right? Because then you feel like, oh, I better find something wrong or add some additional value here or have an idea to make it better or something like that, because we want to tie our value to that. And one thing I want all of you listeners to be aware of is that there is tremendous value in taking time to think. There's tremendous value in reviewing. There's tremendous value in you getting out a whiteboard and just letting thoughts flow out of your mind as you set the vision for your team or for your function, whatever you might do. There's value in you really thinking through the priorities that you set and analyzing where you need to say yes, maybe where you need to say no, maybe you just need to say not yet. There's tremendous value, but that's a mindset shift that we have to make, right? That I don't have to be the one doing the work, analyzing, doing all these things. This podcast, for example, right? I could, after I'm done filming this and recording this, I could, put the YouTube video together. I could put an Instagram reel and Facebook story together. I could, write all the show notes and all these sorts of things. But we've decided that that's really not the best use of my time. And so this podcast is absolutely one of our priorities, yet we've hired a team to execute that. And I stay at a review place. And the reality is that I've had to understand over the 12 years we've had this business where the evolution has happened, right? Where I could eventually hire someone, that there's tremendous value in me looking at the show notes after they've drafted them and helping take it to the next level. There's tremendous value in Shannon, my wife, actually reviewing the reels and the Facebook stories, like all the things you see on LinkedIn and everywhere, for her to review those and tweak and perfect and look at those different things. That's where the value is. But we don't need to do the nitty gritty of like the day-to-day stuff, like formatting it and make sure the volume level's right and all these sorts of things. That's not the best use of time. And so it's working as leaders on seeing the value in these sorts of things. It's an absolutely critical thing. So when I look at priorities for our business, for Matt Phillips Leadership Coaching, when I look down to my right, and if you're watching the YouTube video, you can see me look down to my right. Obviously, you can't see that if you're just listening to the podcast. But I, right down here, have a list of our top 4 priorities. And what we do as a group is we make sure, as a team, is we make sure that everything we're doing is in alignment with one of those. And listen, there's things that have to be done under each of those, right? But again, if we're going to achieve the vision that we've set for the business, for the company, to help millions of people around the world, to have this huge impact, then, and these 4 are our vehicles to actually make that happen, and things we have to focus on, then everything we do has to be in alignment with those items there. So every time I'm trying to make a decision, or that shiny object shows up, or the squirrel runs by, all these sorts of things, I, to the best of my ability, with the help of my team, look to this list. And we analyze, is it in alignment or not? Is it something we need to add or take away, or what's shifting to make sure we achieve the long-term goals? And that's what I want you to really think about out of this podcast episode, is your priorities, and take some of the things we've talked about and utilize them, and choose to think differently and take time and analyze it and see maybe where you're getting distracted and where you're not. Again, in all our programs, we take time to do that because it's such a critical area. Such a critical area. So that's why I wanted to spend time with you today talking about priorities, because it's, oh my gosh, it's a game changer once we gain alignment and get our people marching in the same direction. You know it, I know it. We've got to take the time to actually do it and continually take time to do it. So go take that away today, put it into practice. And as always, if you need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. By the way, if you haven't yet, please go over to mattphillipscoaching.com/metrics. We have put together a metrics cheat sheet, because metrics, like knowing your numbers, is such a critical part, and it gives you indications of where your priorities might be on or off. So use that tool, sign up today, and actually use that in how you analyze your priorities. So with that, thank you for taking your time today. Always good to spend this time with you today, this 20 to 30 minutes, whatever it is, and every podcast. And can't wait to see you on the next. Make sure you give us a 5-star review. Please share it with your friends, with your family, with your coworkers. We're here to make a huge impact, and would love for you to help us do that. So please do that in Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts, wherever you happen to listen to this. And we'll see you next time on the podcast. Thanks. Thank you for joining us today on the Matt Phillips Podcast. If you are like us, we know that you are here to do great things, to become the sales leader that makes things happen and drives big-time sales results. We know you have that big vision, and we are here to help get you where you want to go. We're here to help you develop that unstoppable, rock-solid leadership skill set and help you train to master the one true differentiator: mental toughness. We would love to be part of your journey. So if you are ready, head over to mattphillipscoaching.com and check out the ways that we can help. As always, please share this episode and make sure you subscribe by clicking the button below. Thank you again. And now, go crush the day.